the first speech, which is a double speech, of this second session, in which we will see something about obligation schemes from Great Britain, Ireland, Croatia, and Cyprus. So please, Saibh and Ella, come here, because the only duty you have is to say 2 minutes, 1 minute, stop.
Yeah.
Please, stop, please.
Okay, and do feel free to cut us off whenever it makes sense to do so. So just give you guys a second to all get seated. And by way of introduction, I'm Saibh, and this is my colleague Ella, and we both work on the energy company obligation in the UK. So I'm going to speak for a little bit about the history and sort of design of the obligation, and then Ella's going to talk us through the sort of new second obligation that's come in the last year, which is quite an exciting new development. Okay, let's see if I can get this to work. So we're going to speak a bit first about ECO4 and delivery. So ECO has existed in Great Britain since 2013, but that's slightly misleading. We've actually had a precursor supplier obligation since about 2003. So we're one of the oldest in the game in terms of the world of supplier obligations. And during that time, the scheme has evolved quite a lot. The scheme runs in a few year cycles. In each cycle, there'll be a particular design, and then which will be put into place by legislation, and then there'll be a new design that comes in for the next one. So each time we iterate it, change it, hopefully make it better, and build on the lessons of the previous scheme. So ECO4 is the fourth iteration of the energy company obligation, and it's run from April 2022 to March 2026. The scheme has changed quite significantly over time, and so I'm going to talk about three key features of the current design, which have changed from the previous and which represent that evolution. So the first feature that is notable about it is that it takes a whole house retrofit approach. So the way that the obligated suppliers are encouraged to operate in the scheme is to look at each dwelling in the round, and rather than just deliver a single measure to that house, to look at to examine what the current energy performance of that house is, and think through, with the help of what's called a retrofit coordinator, what package of measures would help to improve that house by the maximum. So that can be a mixture of heating and insulation measures. So the most popular measures tend to include cavity wall insulation and roof insulation, because they represent good value for money. But we're also increasingly seeing deployment of heat pumps and solar panels as well, because we want to move towards doing more heating measures in addition to insulating the UK's housing stock. The second most notable feature of the current design of ECO is that it's very targeted in terms of who's eligible. So previous versions of the scheme have had wider pools of eligible people who can take part in the scheme and get these retrofits. But the current design, the thinking is that we want to retrofit the UK's entire housing stock. And if we're giving these whole house improvements to people, then it's good to start with those who are the worst off. So it's targeted at people who live in what's called fuel poverty. So that's people who are in receipt of certain qualifying welfare payments from the state, which indicate that their income is below a certain threshold, and so very unlikely to be able to afford these retrofits themselves, and also find it difficult to pay for their energy bills. So it's very helpful for them. And also their homes have to be a certain level of efficiency, so that below a certain level. So, there's no point giving these retrofits to people whose homes are already working okay. It's only those whose homes fall below a certain level. The third notable feature of this iteration of the scheme is that there are sub-targets within that. So, for example, there's a certain number of homes at the moment that need to receive like solid wall insulation as one of their measures. Solid wall is very expensive to deliver, and for that reason is not necessarily as cost effective as other measures. However, homes that have solid walls often really do need it, because there's no other way that the efficiency can be improved. We're looking at other ways to improve these homes, such as heating measures, but at the moment we will often consider them to need these solid wall insulation measures, and so we have a specific target to incentivize that. So moving on, we've had some challenges that we've experienced since introducing the scheme, and I'm just going to talk briefly about three of these. So the first is that the number of measures delivered per home has been higher than expected since we introduced the whole house approach, which has meant that the number of homes that the scheme has reached has been lower than expected. It was originally planned in this iteration of the scheme that ECO4 would reach 450,000 homes within its lifetime. We're currently tracking below that target. I think we're over 100,000, but we're not near where we need to be tracking in order to meet that number of homes target. This isn't necessarily such a problem in that it means that one of the reasons behind this is that the number of measures each home is receiving is more, and more of the kind of worst performing houses are receiving support through ECO. But it does mean that we're a bit off track and off beam in terms of how many homes we reach as compared to previous iterations of the scheme, which have seen much higher reach in terms of number of homes. The second issue we've encountered, and it would be interesting to hear whether this has been the same in other European schemes, is that the costs of delivering the scheme have been a lot higher than expected. Partly that's been to do with rising inflation, which I think we've seen across Europe. We need to think about ways that we can address that, which is difficult because the supply chain is somewhat constrained as well, partly because we are doing more measures than expected in the home. The final issue we've had is that we introduced a new route to try and target homes for the scheme, which is local authority flex, which has slightly wider eligibility, but the idea is that it would devolve some of the responsibility for the scheme towards local councils, but we found that that has not been used as much as expected, and there's some administrative reasons for that, so that's been another problem that we've experienced. Finally, and I'm conscious of time, so I won't get into a lot of detail on this slide, but an opportunity that we're bringing in this iteration of ECO is pay for performance. So, and I'd be, again, interested to hear whether other schemes are doing something similar to this. So pay for performance is a mechanism that will allow for suppliers to be rewarded for the actual improvements they deliver in a home, rather than just the assumed benefits through use of smart meters. So after the retrofit, a smart meter will be installed in the house, which will monitor the energy consumption, and it should give you a sort of live read as to how well the house is performing following the retrofit, as opposed to before the retrofit. And then suppliers will therefore be rewarded for a more efficient retrofit, doing a good job, and we'll get more data about how the scheme is functioning. I won't go into, again, as I said, all the detail on the slide because of time, but if you have any questions, please feel free to ask me about them either after this or in the break. And I'll now hand over to Ella to tell you a bit about the new version of the scheme.
All right, great, thanks. So the new version of the scheme is called the Great British Installation Scheme, and that's been developed at pace over the last year in response to the energy crisis. And the aim of this is slightly different to the Eco4 scheme that's still carrying on, and it's looking to reach a wider audience and to help with their energy bills. On average, we assume it will save £300 to £400 per year in people's bills. And so rather than just focusing on the low income households that Eco4 focuses on, we're looking to expand it to a wider pool of households that aren't eligible for any other government energy efficiency scheme, but due to the energy crisis are experiencing a rise in their bills and maybe struggling to meet that. And lastly, it also is still 3 minutes. Okay, I'll move on. All right, so thinking about how it's different from Eco4, firstly, it's the eligibility that I just mentioned. So for this group, we're looking at energy council tax bands to decide if a home is eligible, and also, again, whether the energy performance is in that lower range. And the other change is in measures. So rather than the whole house retrofit approach that Eco4 has, this is going back to single measures, focusing on the most cost-effective cavity wall insulation in particular, and loft has been shown to be most cost-effective. And if it's a more expensive measure, then there may be a cost for the consumers to contribute. All right, and then it's only been in place since this spring, with the scheme starting in April, but the law coming into force in July, so it's still very early days. But we have regular conversations with our largest obligated suppliers to see how it's going, and there are some challenges we're starting to see emerge. 3 of these are on the screen. So the first being the movement of the supply chain. So we've changed the focus of our schemes over the years from single measure to whole house retrofit, and now going back to single measure, the supply chain is starting to struggle to sort of reorientate itself. Second being the cost of compliance. And I wonder if this is again something that other schemes may have found, but for single measures, it doesn't make as much sense. The costs can be seen as disproportionate, as it's a much higher percentage of the cost of the measure itself. And then thirdly, again, given how they're single measures, it can be seen that their administration is too burdensome. And so we're looking at ways to simplify and streamline to make it as effective as possible. I think we're probably out of time for questions, but hopefully. 1 minute? Question that can be answered in 60 seconds, anyone?
It's the rating of the house. Is it for included or?
It's for England, Wales and Scotland. So our scheme is Great Britain wide, so it doesn't include Northern Ireland. And so the energy performance certificates need to be the equivalent of D or below. And for Eco4, there are some sub-targets to focus on the ones that are the really poor performing households, so E, F and G.
Thank you very much. Thank you for
Thank you.
be strict on time.
We're very concerned, as you can see.
So the second speech is from Aileen. CI. Here you are.
You can come.
You can go.
That's a PDF. Yes.
Just tap it on, is it?
Yeah.
So we remain in the same geographical region, but different country, different scheme. Please, Aileen.
Hi everyone, I'm Aileen Duffy. I'm from the Sustainable Energy Authority of Ireland, so Ireland's energy agency. We're the administrator of our EOS, our Energy Efficiency Obligation Scheme. So we've just very recently redesigned the scheme, and I'm going to focus in on some of the aspects that we've redesigned today very quickly. So what I'm going to look at, like a very quick look at the Irish EOS to give you a bit of background, why we redesigned the scheme, what were the main changes that we made, looking specifically at our sub-targets. So we have 2 sub-targets, the criteria that we brought in and, you know, how we're finding introducing those criteria. And then a couple of points at the end just about some of the challenges that we're finding with moving to a new approach. So yeah, this slide's very busy and I don't want to spend too long on it, but just a quick snapshot. We started our scheme in 2014 and we're in this new phase of it. So it's running until 2023 to 30. So we have the Department of the Environment, Climate and Communications, so DEC, that's our parent department, our ministry. I was over there for the last 3 years working on this redesign, and now I'm back into SEAI, who are the administrators of the scheme. We have 17 obligated parties, so I know that ranges so much with the numbers of obligated parties, but we have 17 and they're a mixture of distributors, which includes importers and retailers across our 4 main energy markets. So electricity, natural gas, liquid fuel and solid fuel. We have loads of different stakeholders. I won't list them all out there, but some obligated parties use different delivery partners, or they work with contractors out there. And then there's various consultants who are involved in the scheme and a lot of beneficiaries. So we have annual energy efficiency targets that the obligated parties have to meet. Any actions are eligible for all end use sectors across the scheme. So it could be transport, industry, commercial, residential. And then we have 2 specific sub-targets that are related to residential and energy poverty, which collectively make up around 15% of the target. Our kind of currency is energy credits, and that's 1 kilowatt hour of new final energy savings. Again, the how is a bit too much to get into, but we use generally a mix of scaled and metered savings. Each obligated party, in terms of quality, they have to have a quality management system, and we also, as the administrator, do audits and inspections on the measure to ensure the savings are there, the quality is there. And then obligated parties use different schemes, government schemes. They kind of leverage those to deliver their programs, and they can deliver their targets in different ways. So directly themselves reporting savings, or they can trade targets or exchange credits with other obligated parties, or possibly buy out. So what did we do with the redesign? So basically, as I said, we've had an EOS in place since 2014. It has been hugely successful, really. Everyone met their targets, and we actually over-delivered. It delivered around 60% on average of our 2020 Article 7 target. And I suppose it's been mentioned before, but in addition to significant savings, there's also been huge benefits outside that in terms of stimulating the market, improving the quality of measures that are being done, and just being really embedded in the market. It's really part and parcel of the energy efficiency market now in Ireland. So we really wanted to continue the EOS with a combination of alternative measures for our 2030 target, but we wanted to redesign the scheme and increase the ambition. And the main reasons for this, the redesign, was looking at changes that came in with the new directive, so an increased target, and change into final energy and various M&V increases in Annex 5. But also a key part is our government, the policies that we have in place, mainly in relation to retrofit and residential. We have a climate action plan, we have a national retrofit plan. We're pushing much more towards deeper retrofits and more targeted energy poverty measures. So we wanted to make sure the EOS was aligned with that. So over the last few years, we've been redesigning and consulting, and spent a lot of time on the consultation and the design and the analysis. And we've been running a transition scheme in parallel to keep the savings coming in while we did that. So we've only just started the new EOS from the start of this year, and we have new regulations in place that are quite detailed and have strengthened on the last regulations. So we are very early days. I know you said that as well, in the implementation. So we're still learning. So very quickly, we did have a good scheme, so we didn't change a lot, but we did look at it again and see what we'd keep. So it's mostly the same obligated parties. The majority of the target is open to any sector, and we've kept the two sub-targets for residential and energy poverty. Obligated parties can still leverage government schemes, so it means that they can work with what would be alternative measures, but they can count the savings, and then we obviously have to ensure there's no double counting. And the administrative regime is very, very similar. But what we did change, I suppose, we lowered our obligation thresholds, so we brought in a few more smaller energy companies, mainly in the solid fuel market. There's a bigger target, so it's 60% similar again, but obviously you have a bigger Article 7 target before the recast. And then we had to take into account these M&V requirements and everything like that. But the main thing, I suppose, and what I'm focusing on now in the next few slides, is just about this increased policy alignment. So focusing on the deep retrofits and the worst performing homes. We have actually narrowed the sub-targets in a way, but because we're making the requirements much tougher and more ambitious, it was kind of from our impact assessment, that was the necessary thing to do. And we've also moved away from deemed savings or standardized energy savings table over to EPCs and using those for scoring. So the changes to our sub-targets, so I suppose, at a simple level, like the old EOS, so the one pre-2023, we had around 25% for residential, and it does look like we're decreasing ambition by going to a smaller amount on that. But I suppose we did significant analysis, and our impact assessment would have said, okay, we really want to increase the requirements and the eligibility criteria that obligated parties have to meet. So we need to take that into account, the cost for the customer, the opportunities that are there. And it ended up being that we reduced the residential down to 10%. It's still 15% of a bigger target, so it is an increase overall, but relatively speaking, it's decreased. So like I said, we wanted to take into account that we wanted to focus still on energy poverty, but we wanted to be much more prescriptive in what obligated parties could do. Previously, they were focused much more on shallow single measures, which was great at the time, but now we need them in a different space. So these are the changes in our criteria. So I just can kind of whittle through this. But previously, to get residential savings towards their sub-target, they just had to do any energy efficiency measure in a home, and they'd get the saving related from the credits table. Now they have to do measures, but they have to meet a minimum uplift. So they have to hit if this is in primary energy, they have to hit 100 kilowatt hours meter squared per year on the EPC. And they also either have to get the home to a B2 or what we call a B2 pathway. So it is to slow the transition and not say it has to be a B2, but it has to be going in the right direction. In terms of energy poverty, we've got tougher there as well. They have to go, the homes have to be either owned by people in receipt of certain welfare payments or local authority or approved housing bodies. But in addition, now we are focusing on the worst first, which is, you know, in line with European and national policy. So they have to go to a D2 or worse home, and they have to bring it up to a B2 or other. So like it's quite challenging, and it's been a big change. So it is moving like that, similar to the UK, the package of works per home. So yes, so some key points. I could write a lot more than one slide on this, and we are, like I said, only first year of the new scheme, and one of our obligated parties, SSE, are here, and they're going to be talking in the afternoon as well. But I suppose it's getting the balance right. We have the recast coming down the line. We need to increase volume of savings, but we also wanted to make sure that we are, you know, moving in the direction of deep retrofits, one-stop shops, focused worst first homes. So you have to get the balance right, and you can't get greedy, I suppose, on that. So we needed to increase the ambition. We felt the EOS wasn't doing the heavy lifting as it stood, but at the same time, if we moved too far, too fast, it would topple over. And so we had to be so mindful of that. Like I said, we want to make sure that all our policies, our alternative measures, and our EOS are all moving in the same direction, and there's synergies there. Otherwise, it makes no sense, and the market gets very confused anyway. I think hopefully Stuart will say this when he speaks later on, but like we have been involving the obligated parties and key stakeholders very early in this process and throughout. They're obviously obligated. So they have a different perspective, but you know, it's so useful to have them involved and giving them the heads up on what's coming down the line. Big thing that's been problematic is the beneficiaries not understanding all the rules of the scheme, and they lack trust in the obligated parties, I suppose, saying you're trying to kind of screw me over for credits here. And so they need to have a trusted body like SEAI or the department, and we need to keep them informed, and we're working on that. And yeah, it just can't be said too much about the uncertainty that can come on the ground with the supply chain if you're changing to a new regime. They get so used to the last regime, and it can have all kinds of strange consequences that we're finding out with contracts and everything like that. So yeah, I suppose don't underestimate the transition from old to new. It's very challenging for everyone involved, but I would hope that it will be a success, and we're going to keep monitoring it and see what we'll do with the recast and introducing that. So we can come back in a couple of years when we've a few years data under our belt.
Thank you very much, Aileen, also to stick to the times. And so we are continuing to see very different mechanisms, and which is interesting. Now it's the turn of Vesna. And so we move to the Balkan area. Jump. You jump to see what is happening in Croatia.
Well, Dario, nothing much is happening. Same old, same old. Yeah, hello, good day to everyone. My name is Vesna. I come from Energy Institute Hrvoj Požar in Zagreb, Croatia. Same as my colleague from Poland, we are state by declaration, by establishment, but not by financing. But still, we are a state-owned institute, and as such, providing support to our competent ministry for Article 7/8, 9, 10 and energy efficiency obligation scheme. So a little bit about obligation scheme in Croatia. How do I move? Yeah, I see it. Sorry, everything's fine. Yeah. So the legal framework for establishment of energy efficiency obligation scheme in Croatia was actually adopted in 2019, and so from since 2019 we have energy efficiency obligation scheme established in Croatia. We decided as a country to fulfill Article 7. A target with combination of energy efficiency obligation scheme and alternative measures. And what are the alternative measures is clearly defined in NEAP. Yes, we still have 3-year NEAPs. We kept it in the legislation and in NECP. In this first period, it was prescribed by the law that we will accomplish our Article 7 target by more or less 50-50 distribution between alternative measures and EEOS, and for this period we are 70% in favor of energy efficiency obligation scheme. The second piece of legislation is regulation on monitoring and verification, which actually establishes mandatory use of IT platform to report energy savings by subsidy providers, which are responsible for alternative measures and for obligated parties within the obligation scheme. This piece of regulation also has, let's say, a catalog of measures. We have prescribed methods for deemed savings for 31 measures. But obligated parties within EEOS must deliver a document, we call it elaboration or elaborate on energy savings, in which energy savings are calculated by independent authorized person. This independent authorized person is actually authorized energy auditor or authorized engineers that have authorization from our engineering chambers. And with that document, they claim their savings and upload it into this IT system. And Ministry approves these savings, of course, in the procedure every year. So who are obligated parties in Croatia? Energy suppliers of electricity, natural gas, heat from district heating, and oil derivatives. And we gradually introduced the scheme. So in 2019, those delivering more than 300 gigawatt hours were obligated parties. And now all energy suppliers delivering more than 50 gigawatt hours are obligated parties. Just as an illustration, oil derivatives supplier with, let's say, 2 or 3 gas stations is obligated party in the system. So I think it's a nice information, just to get the impression. So how can they fulfill their obligation? Of course, they can do actions at final end users, including small RES applications for self-consumption. And it turns out one of the lessons learned is that bigger companies perform measures by themselves, but smaller really not. Also, in previous period, it was allowed to implement measures which are not strictly end use, but more especially in district heating, like heating substations, and it was a huge part of the savings. And there is also a possibility to buy savings from third party. So unlike this morning in white certificate schemes presentations, we don't have organized market or certificates for trading energy savings. But it is possible that obligated party make bilateral agreement with someone who performed energy efficiency improvement measure and to buy this savings. If they don't comply with the obligation, they have to pay to energy efficiency fund, and 0.18 euro per kilowatt hour is this penalty. Are you okay? Okay. Okay. That's okay. I already mentioned our monitoring and verification platform. I will not go into details, but in the afternoon session we will discuss about it. But I just wanted to say that our Ministry of Economy and Sustainable Development has exactly one person dealing with whole energy efficiency obligation scheme in the country. So this is also a fun fact from Croatia. Now in a minute, just about results and what we have accomplished. So in previous period, you may see that we actually did not achieve cumulative savings for this period. You don't have it on this graph in the morning, Jean-Sebastian, but here it is. But you can also see from this table that actually obligation scheme delivered better than alternative measures. So it's also interesting fact. What will happen from now on? We are struggling. We were struggling in the previous period. We were struggling with 125 petajoules of cumulative energy saving target. Now it's 180. So the challenge is here, and how it really looks like in this first two years of new cumulative period is shown here. So when we did NECP reporting, so we reported 1.73 petajoules and compare it to 180 of the target in this first period, and you may see that cumulative effect of this saving will not be multiplied 10, because these are short-term measures, and this is shown in the nicely in the graph. 1/5 of this savings come from information measures. So information campaigns and energy advising, often not very targeted, but like more general. So this is one issue that we have to deal with it. The other issue is, as you see, that this 18 plus 10% is from fuel additives, so additives to diesel and petrol. And this is also one year lifetime measure. And the third issue that we will have to deal with is this green part, because these are non-standardized measures. I told you that we have 31 standardized measures, but obviously on the market we have much more not standardized measures, and we get different kinds of elaborations on energy savings on this part. So these are some challenges in our system, but first and foremost challenge is to be solved very, very soon, and that is whether we will keep this ratio of 70 to 30% of distribution between energy efficiency obligation scheme and alternative measures, and we need to decide it on that very, very soon and declare it in NECP. Also, maybe I forgot to tell you, but also one interesting fact is energy poverty ring fence. We have it now in the directive, but in Croatia, all this time we had a possibility for obligated parties to increase their savings if these savings were implemented among vulnerable customers. None of them used this possibility, so carrot obviously does not work. So we'll have to think about sticks. maybe. This is it, Dario. I hope I'm in time.
Yeah,
And,
you are. Well, 1 minute, but since you discovered something missing in a work from Jean-Sébastien, you deserve
Yes,
the prize.
I'm
So
experienced.
this minute is
Thank you.
your
Thank
prize.
you.
And now we are moving towards the last speech from Christodoulos. I hope I spell it well. I just say the names because so I can be wrong only once, not all with sure name. And you notice that each scheme is using a different measures, so kilowatt hours Kumak, ton of oil equivalent, petajoules, etc. This is maybe to remind that making comparison between among numbers is to handle with a lot of care, since the differences that exist between schemes. So, please.
Thank you very much. My name is Christodoulos Ellinopoulos, and I'm coming from Ministry of Energy in Cyprus. I will start my presentation with a short description of the energy system of Cyprus, just to understand our local specificities. Although in Cyprus electricity market opened up to the competition a few years ago, still a state-owned organization, the Electricity Authority of Cyprus, has a market share of 92%. We do not have natural gas in Cyprus, so our mix relies on electricity relies on imported energy in the form of heavy fuel oil. The power system is small and isolated. There is no interconnection, and is due to be available by 2029. We are, as you see from the small table at the right side, we are among the member states with the highest motorization rates, almost 15% more than the EU average. Also, there is a moderate heat demand. Cyprus, together with Malta, we have the lowest heating degree days and cooling degree days. Again, if you compare it with the EU average, we are 5% lower. And in fact, in Cyprus, we don't need heating or cooling half of the year. So the temperature there is nearly 25 degrees the half of the year. And for that the reason, there is no district networks. It's not cost effective to run a district network. There is only one electricity distribution, and there is significant delays in the opening of the national retail competitive electricity market mainly due to technical reasons. So the energy efficiency obligation scheme was firstly introduced in 2019 officially, including which we included it in the NECP. The introduction of the energy efficiency obligation scheme was intended to enable competition among other electricity energy efficiency market for the benefit of final consumers. So in the timeline below, you can see the main milestones we have as I said, in 2019, the obligation scheme included within the measures in the draft NECP. Then in 2021, we published the first regulation, which was formed the core of the legal framework put in place to regulate the energy efficiency obligation scheme. In 2022, we identified the obligation parties and setting their annual targets. In October 2022, the obligated parties submit their annual compliance plan. This year, from 1st of January, the implementation of their measures have commenced. And early next year, in January, we will start our monitoring and verification. The key actors for our application scheme is the Ministry of Energy that I'm coming from. We have 7 obligated parties compared to what I had today. It is not only a baby in terms of age, but in terms of magnitude. The energy suppliers should be more have sales more than 15 kilotons. As you see, there is the only one electricity company and 6 oil products companies, and all of them representing more than 90% of the market. The largest part of the energy saving target, which is 65%, has been allocated to oil product companies and the rest to the electricity authority. So this is the procedure that we have to follow. As I said, in October, obligated parties must submit the annual compliance plan to the ministry, and these plans shall be assessed and approved by the ministry. January next year, obligation party must report the amount of end-user energy savings achieved the previous year, including the submission of the required evidence. The ministry should verify the submitted documents and conduct sampling checks to verify whether they implement the measures. So the main characteristic of our obligation scheme is that this will represent 40% of our national target. Actually, this figure is based on the previous target. We have not decided yet whether we'll absorb the increase of the ambition due to the E&D recast, but more or less the 30 to 40% will be the share of the obligated parties to the national target. We have 24 standardized bottom-up methods, but obligated parties may develop and use their own methods after receiving the approval of the ministry. There are 3 ways to achieve their target: by implementing their own energy saving projects, exchanging certified energy savings between ESCOs and other obligated parties if there is an overachievement from the other obligated parties, or by paying a compensation fee, which is 1.25 million per kiloton. Of course, if there is the option, if exceeding their obligation target, banking is allowed to carry over the excess saving to the next year. In the case of not achieving their obligation for a given year, borrowing is allowed under certain conditions, which that is to achieve at least 30% of their annual saving target. If not, they have to pay a compensation or to buy it from other energy service companies. Projects that receive public funding are not eligible, so the financing should be from their own funds. This is something that we learned from the other obligation schemes. We were not allowed the obligation parties to meet their target just from behavioral measures. There is a minimum 30% of the annual target to come from technical measures, and over the period, not more than 25%, less than 25% should become from behavior measures. Energy poverty is not explicitly addressed by our energy efficiency obligation scheme, but there is a multiplier for when measures are going to energy poor houses. This is the result of the first year, but based on the annual compliance plan, you can see that we have overachievement for the first year, and this is mainly due to the banking of energy saving actions implemented in the previous year. As I said, we firstly introduced our intention to start the obligation scheme in 2019. So the obligated parties started to be prepared. So in 2021 and 2022, they did some measures. But this is is theoretically. We will see it next year when the monitoring and verification will start. I'm finishing my last one. So here is the cumulative energy savings distributed by energy savings, we see that the biggest measure is the fuel additives and the promotion of high efficiency lubricants, followed by awareness campaign and efficient lighting. But as I said before, this is a theoretical achievement, and more detailed and accurate results are expected to be available next year. And this, thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. Now we have 1 hour for question or something less, I don't know. Oh, but theoretically 9 minutes, correct? So please, speakers, come here. And of course, who wants to ask questions? Wolfgang.
Yeah, again, Wolfgang, and I have a question particularly to Aileen and to Ireland. I come from a country who has never opted for energy saving obligations, Germany. And one argument was it's problematic with deep renovation of buildings, and you talked about that. The argument was we have nice subsidy programs that push deep renovations. And now you make these efforts in Ireland to expand the share. I understand that you have, I did not totally understand the mechanism. I understand that you have requirements of how much the building shall improve, but I was not sure to understand how can you assure that there is a sufficiently large number of measures undertaken, because if there are many alternative or other measures in the scheme which are cheaper, then the people would opt, I don't know, for industrial measure or whatsoever, and leave the deep renovation measures alone. So I did not totally understand how you assure that there's a sufficiently large number of measures are undertaken in the scheme.
Yeah, I suppose the way we ensure that, and it's a minimum rather than a target, but the sub-target, so 15% of the total energy efficiency of our EOS target has to be in those sectors. So I suppose from an obligated party point of view, they will naturally gravitate towards the cheapest measures for them in terms of the contribution and how hard it is to deliver those savings. So if we didn't have the sub-targets, they would probably all go to industry, even though there can be challenges there. So by having 10% for residential and then 5% for energy poor, we ensure that they have to go towards ones that are less cost effective for them. What they do when they're delivering this is we have several policy measures, big schemes in Ireland that are delivering retrofit measures. The obligated parties are partnering with those schemes to kind of promote them and work with those schemes to work on, like a lot of them have established themselves as one-stop shops, or they partner with one-stop shops to get into that space. So they have to deliver 15% of deep retrofit now, whether it's energy poor or in other homes. But what we expect to find is in that other 85%, they will actually be delivering residential savings and deep retrofit savings, because they're in that space now and they've diversified their businesses into that space. But yeah, we know it's quite new. Obligation schemes generally are the single shallow measures. I know the UK is very different in that, and I worked on the CESP scheme actually and ECO as well. So like if you go too far with the prescription, it can be very difficult for an obligation scheme. But we're hoping we've got the balance right, and yeah, it is a tricky balance. But yeah, they have to hit 15%, so they don't have any choice with that. Does that answer your question?
Yeah,
kind of.
Get a sporty moderator.
Good morning. I like to be at the last row too. Okay, it's a question to the audience and maybe to the commission and of course to the panelists. So I'm Didier Bosboeuf from ADEME, and I work on cross-country comparison. And I see that, for example, in Greece, and it's also the reality for Ireland, they claim that part of their energy efficiency obligation will be delivered through informative measures like campaign, etc. And for Greece, half of their But Cyprus, but I know also Greece. Greece, there are some relationship, I suppose, between Greece and Cyprus. So half of the obligation will be covered by informative measures. We know by experience that it's very difficult to evaluate the impact of advising campaign. So more or less, you claim obligation or result of obligation through something that you cannot really evaluate. And Jean-Sébastien insists a lot this morning, saying that there are some measures which have a 1-year impact and some which have more 10 years impact. So in fact, this discount is accounting for the fact that advertising campaign can not really be evaluated, is taking into account through the fact that it's account for only for 1 year. My question to the audience, do you think it's fair, or especially for the Commission, which has to evaluate at the end of the story the impact of the plan, do you think it's fair or not? To be clear, for me, it's not fair to evaluate the advertising campaign. Nobody knows how much he can be accounted for.
Okay, thank you. Wants to answer, because in my opinion, the underlying point is that you can all switch to the Italian MMV system, so nobody will reach the targets, but all savings will be real and effective. Apart from that,
Yeah,
Christoph.
okay. Thank you for the question. As I said, we put a limit, so we don't want the energy companies to promote the awareness campaign just for the awareness campaign. So there is a cap, only 25% during the whole period. Okay, but I think this is the problem. The problem is coming from the directive. I think the directive itself unfairly treated the energy savings, and I can explain on that. When you have a period of 10 years, and there are like the measures on the insulation, which they have 20 years of lifetime. And as you know, the energy companies look for the cheapest solution. So if you cut the savings that they claim in 10 years, they prefer to go to cheaper solutions. So this is coming from the directive itself. So I believe that the directive should allow the savings to be not just the 10%, but all the savings to go to the next period, because by that is against the energy efficiency first principle that we include in the directive, which if you go, which energy efficiency first principle is actually the cost-effective measures, because you did it by cost benefit analysis. So I believe if we give the chance to the energy suppliers, they will go to technical measures, but as it is now, there is a restriction from the directive.
Thank you.
My question was directed to the Commission.
Okay. Well, it can be, we'll organize a webinar on Didier questions, because he's always making good questions. I think there is also a...
No, just a quick comment to say that this topic of the evaluation of behavioral measures were raised also in the stakeholder surveys we did in February, and we already worked on that. So some of you maybe, and for sure Sam was at the B8 conference last week and organized, and Margot was there as well, a session on that point. Definitely these measures are eligible to the directive. There is a surveyed savings option that allows that, and we will provide soon examples about good practices in the field. So I understand your point, your preference for technical measures, Didier, but that's also the flexibility of member states to choose their strategy according to the rules of the directive.
Very good. There is a last question.
Hello, Salim from STX. My question was regarding the energy efficiency scheme in Croatia. There was a third way to fulfill the obligation, was to buy from another counterparty who has made energy efficiency, energy saving. What are the requirements for the selling counterparty to produce energy savings? And should they be, is it mandatory for them to be obligated, or can any company who performs energy efficiency auditing or consultancy generate energy savings in order to sell them later?
Yeah. Okay, so anyone can generate energy savings. So to answer the question very shortly. So basically, I can renovate my house, and I can engage authorized person to calculate and, let's say, verify savings from my renovation of the house, and I will have a paper document proving that, and I can sell it to obligated party. So this is the principle. There is so these third parties that I mentioned can be really anyone. In reality, these are ESCOs, and these are larger industrial or commercial companies that are aware of the system, and that actually undertake their own energy efficiency measures, and in cost benefit analysis, in decision making, they calculate also price of savings that they will sell to obligated parties. So that's the principle. So this example of my own house, it's not happening. It's much larger scale. Yeah, but it's important that this document is produced by the independent and authorized energy auditor or engineer, who will then gather all the data, all the proofs that a measure is actually implemented, that it complies with all requirements. And with that independent paper, then ministry actually takes it into account.
Sorry, just if I may, one more question to the British scheme. I would like to know, because it's very interesting, your scheme together with Pay for Performance, kind of rewarding of performance. I would like to know, how do you deal with a baseline setting, since you will measure the savings only ex post after the investment is done and the project is finished, installing smart meters. So this will measure only gas or electricity, I suppose, not other fuels. And basically, did you have any challenges with setting the baseline?
So I can take that question. So to clarify, we haven't yet introduced pay for performance. This is a planned innovation. We have trialed it. We did a trial using smart meters last year, which was very successful. The issue with baseline is one of the key issues around it. The plan is that when we introduce, before we do the retrofit on the dwelling, and we'll put the smart meter in beforehand, so we can measure the average energy consumption and then baseline it against the improvement. One of the implications of this is that we can only carry out these pay for performance retrofits during the heating season, because during the summer, when the heating is not being used, we won't have a sense of what the sort of energy consumption is likely to be. So that does limit slightly the use of it. It also pairs with another challenge that we have with the scheme, which is to do with preventing fraud and gaming of it, and ensuring we're getting accurate readouts from the smart meters. There's a lot of work that's going on with the National Physics Laboratory to develop algorithms to help to solve that problem. But it's definitely got a lot of challenges around that. But yeah, you make a very good point. We'll certainly update on how the scheme progresses once we actually do introduce it and roll it out, because we're expecting uptake to be reasonably small at first, because it's a new thing. But definitely the grand vision in the long term would be that this is the future of the scheme, because at the moment we measure improvements basically through assumptions, which feed into various equations that we use to say, if you install this package of measures in this type of house, you're likely to get this type of improvement, whereas actually getting that concrete evidence will help us to gain a lot more information about the functioning of the scheme.
Thank you. My question was very similar, actually. Well, sorry, I was being sorry, that the Brits hadn't been asked a question, but I was going to, so maybe just elaborating a little bit more on that. So obviously the target of the British scheme is low-income, poor performance buildings. So one would expect the hypothesis might be that they're underheating in the first place because of the costs of heating. So you do an energy efficiency measure. If you're measuring energy consumption, it might go up, and that might be actually something that you'd like to see as a program administrator, because these people are suffering poor health or whatever because they're not able to afford heating in their homes. And now you did mention one thing, I think, which struck me as being interesting, was measuring internal temperatures, not just energy consumption. So I just wondered if you could elaborate a little bit more about what performance means, I suppose, in the context of the British scheme, which is focused so much on energy poverty.
In the end, that scheme, I continue to say that. That's it.
Yeah, of course. And those are both, I think there were kind of two questions. They're both really, really good questions and kind of cut to some of the key issues around introducing pay for performance. So in order, I think the first thing you asked was about this issue around the household then having the measures introduced and then increasing their use of heating. That's a phenomenon called comfort taking, which we are looking to account for in how we measure the performance of pay for performance itself. It is one of the issues that we have around it. It's not necessarily, as you say, a bad thing, but it could present issues in terms of measuring the outputs. So when we talk about performance, what we mean is not just reduction of the energy consumption. It's about sort of the overall energy efficiency of the home. So the key value that we measure using the smart meters is something called the heat transfer coefficient, or the HTC, and that measures how much heat is lost by the house, or like how much the heat changes from the inside to the outside. So the smart meter, the data we'll use to assess, to build that number, is not just the internal temperature of the house, but also things like weather data. So you can assess, in the summer, the performance of the house as well as in the winter. So hopefully that will help to give us a bit more information about it, because we'll be looking at not just how much the changing heating measure, the new heating measures change the home, but also the fabric measures of the house. It's important to note actually that in the first iteration of pay for performance, it will not be eligible for retrofits that involve any heating measures. It will just be fabric measures. So it will just be things like insulation, for some of the reasons that you set out. It's harder to sort of measure that, but the ambition would be in the long term we can iron out some of these problems and apply it to retrofits that use heating measures as well. But in the first wave, it will just be fabric measures. I hope that answers your question.
So thank you very much to our speakers.